kind of wake you up a little bit?
Yeah.
Benjamin Hale, Honishe, Kit the Chidi, Neshle, Toto Kwaja, Bashis Chi, Totsoni Dash Che, Kia Ani Dashanali. What I said in my language was an introduction. I was introducing myself, and I'm called Benjamin Hale. My Navajo people, we belong to a kinship within our Navajo nation. It's like a clan system. When you're born into a Navajo family, you are of your mother. You are your mother's clan. So in my traditional ways, I said that I am of the Red House clan. That's my mom's side of the family. Kidlachihi is the Navajo word. And then I said I was born from my father's side, Totokwanje. That translates to salt water. Then I have two grandfathers. My mom's dad, my maternal grandfather, his clan is Toatsoni, means big water. Then my paternal grandfather, my father's father, his clan is Kia'ani, it means the towering rock people, the cliff dwellers. So myself, that's what my father and mother taught me. They told us, one day you're going to stand in front of people. You have to introduce yourself like that. You might have other Native people in the audience. You might have somebody from your own relations in that group. And they said even more important than that, the Creator, God Almighty, the spiritual, holy people, your ancestors that went before you, they're all listening. He said they're going to know who's talking to them. That's what I was told. Especially in ceremonies, they said you have to introduce yourself. That way the Creator knows who's talking to you. So in that way, that's a little bit of what we talk about when we use this instrument. In my tribe, we say asat. That's a general word for a drum. I'll tell you a little bit of philosophy about what this drum represents to us. It's just not an instrument. It's not just a rhythm to keep time and beat. For us, songs that are sung with this instrument are very sacred to us. Our singing is a second level of prayer. First is our expression, the spoken word. The second one is our singing. The third level of prayer is dance. We always had dances to our ceremonies. And then the fourth one is living and walking that prayer. So in that way, we have those steps that we progress in life and try to understand what that means. And I remember as a young person that was told to me, I remember at the time I really didn't understand it, but it stayed in my mind. And at the same time, as I went along in life, especially in the more recent years, I really began to understand what I was told. So those are the kind of things, memories and philosophies that we pass on to one another. We never had the written word. We never had organized religions. We never had books and papers and pens in our way of learning. Our education was the world around us. Our education was hands-on. Our education was a verbal tradition. So in our ceremonies, we sit in there and they talk about all these wonderful things. They talk about the Creator, all these stories and analogies. And you wonder, how does that person remember all that? In our traditional settings in our communities long ago, there was a person that had all the stories in place, creation stories, all the way up into our family trees. Those important events were all embedded in our ceremonies, our songs. And that storyteller, the best example I could give you in today's living, our modern times, is a librarian. You could go into a library and say, oh, I want to read books about this author or this subject, and then in their minds they know exactly what category, the number, and tell you what bookshelf that book is located on. It's the same way, except that library was in that person's head. that library was in the memory bank. So those are the kind of things that I try to remember, that I call upon the Creator and my ancestors that went before me. Help me out. Help me, God, Creator Almighty. And through that introductions, I'm calling upon my ancestors to help me to say the right words that might touch somebody's heart. To me, that's what spiritual practice is. In our traditional ways, we don't have no higher I guess you might say, like in organized religion, how they have a pope and then cardinals, you know, a hierarchy, I guess you might say, you know, a system that you might have like a supervisor or people that overlook you. We don't have those kind of systems in our teachings. It's our elders. They're the ones that tell us. Our grandparents, great-grandparents, spiritual leaders in our communities. And the way that you pick that up and learn is there's no books, like I said, no recordings. You have to go sit in their ceremonies. You have to sit there and learn it firsthand. You have to remember it from your heart. So in a way, it's a way that you come to understand it, and it's passed on through verbal traditions. So in our traditional ways, they say when you learn it that way, there's no lies told when you sit in those ceremonies. So that's the kind of messages that we pass on when we use this instrument. This particular drum right here, there's a maple frame that's used from a maple tree. The hide that comes from a large animal. Long ago, they used the buffalo, the elk, large deers, large game they used for those covering those instruments like that. This instrument that I used here, I made this one with a maple frame and elk hide is what's covering this one. But when a person utilizes those in a traditional way, you kind of have to do your own research and ask questions, like I said, from elders, from other drummers that are more experienced than yourself. I can't just go out and kill an animal and cut a tree like they used to do. It's very difficult. I can't live in my ancestors' shoes. It's a different time, a different world now. But yet, those philosophies, the Creator's laws, principles, and values, they never change. So I can use those teachings, use those words that they give me, the advice, the prayers, the way of making offerings to construct these instruments. That way, at least, I'm trying to do the best I can in this modern times that we live. And you'll see that a lot of our issues that we deal with today as Native Americans, it comes from being separated from that culture. See, living in the urban area, you know, we're expected to go to school like everybody else, get a job like everybody else, get educated. Our culture is nowhere in any of those. You know, they might touch on it in education. You can't really talk about your culture at your career or your work. And at the same time, when you go to look for spiritual guidance, you know, we have Christian churches. You know, they expect us to look in a book to find our teachings. So myself, I've taken it upon myself to remember, choosing to remember what the ancestors, what my parents taught me, what my grandparents taught me, the experiences that I've had in participating around that drum, participating at community social gatherings, sitting in ceremonies, to call upon that memory of those experiences, to be able to provide this kind of opportunity for our community members to be able to be exposed to the culture. Because you can't go to any university and find these things. It doesn't exist there. There's no such thing as American Indian 101, you know, culture. They have American Indian Studies program, but most of that is about looking at what's written down in the history books. So without that exposure, a lot of our conventional education that the young people go to, they think that Native people are something of the history in history books. So myself, I go out to schools. I take dancers with me, little kids, as well as elders. And we take a drum like that and dress in our traditional clothes. And it's like, to them, it's like something coming out of the history pages. But yet, here we are. You know, and I tell people, we're testaments of the people before Columbus. Before they ever crossed the oceans, we had trade routes here. We had our own traditional languages, traditional foods. We had our own ceremonies, our own belief systems, our own languages. Those still exist today. But a lot of our young people, because they're not exposed to it, they don't have the opportunities to learn those things. Because of intermarrying, a lot of different reasons, being brought up in an urban area, a lot of those opportunities are far and few unless their parents take it upon themselves to take them back to their homelands. Sometimes it's just like a vacation. Then you're there for 2 or maybe 3 weeks, and then you come home, go back to school. That's not enough time. You have to live there in order to pick up that language. You have to be brought up around that culture to really understand it. I was fortunate because I had traditional parents. So inside of our home, they did their best to teach us our language. They brought us up around this powwow drum. And they made, my mom took, almost, I remember her whole life, she used to make us things, beadwork. My father used to make feather work, and that's what we used on our dance clothes. Myself, I watched them on a daily basis, so I picked it up just by watching them. I passed that on to my kids. I brought my kids up like that. So they're actively participating in their culture through the powwow circle, through this drum, this instrument. So in this protocol that we're going to share with you, that's what we're trying to expose those community members that are caught up in substance misuse, drugs and alcohol. We're trying to reintroduce this culture to them in a way that they would understand it, knowing that some of them might not have any knowledge of their own traditional teachings. This drum right here has a lot of teachings alone by itself, but it seems to be something of the Creator, like I said, passed on. It's our tie to the world around us. It represents the heartbeat of the earth, the spiritual language of that tree and the animal that sacrificed, so that we're able to use these materials that come from our surroundings, our environment. We say that sound, and us North American tribal people, we don't just hit that drum. There's a song that goes to it. Our songs are so important. We have healing songs. We have songs for our children, our grandkids. We have lullaby songs. We have songs for the sun, the moon, the sunrise. We have songs for our Mother Earth, for the plants, for the birds. We have songs for the flag. We have songs for our veterans, for our warriors. We still use those in our everyday life, all tied to that drum right there. So in that way, to be a singer, it's not something like a hobby. Myself, I grew up dancing around that drum my whole life. And then when I decided to take it more seriously, then I started sitting around that drum knowing what my father taught me. It's no plaything. You have to take it seriously and make a commitment. It's a lifetime commitment. Not just, like I said, like a hobby on the weekend. So that's the commitment I made. So those kind of things that happened in my life kind of led up to this point where all of a sudden everybody's looking for different ways. So that's how I kind of got pushed up to the forefront. Dr. Dan Dickerson gave me the title of cultural leader. You know, myself, I don't like wearing labels, even as a spiritual leader or a spiritual healer. To me, it's the Creator that does those things. Myself, with that understanding, I call upon the Creator. Help me out, God. Help me to sing the right song that's going to touch somebody's heart so they'll feel the motivation to make the necessary changes for them to understand that they have the ability to heal themselves. That's the way I look at that drum. And that's what it's done for myself. I made mistakes. I made some wrong choices in life. And when the time came to make necessary choices, when I was feeling depressed, when it could have went into despair, I could have started having real serious mental problems. But instead, I turned to my culture. I turned to this drum, and it helped me to turn my life around. So in that way, that's what we pass on in these teachings, along with the 12-step program and some of our traditional philosophies. So myself, I just wanted to share that much with you at this time, and I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Dan Dickerson. Thank you very much.